Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. I hope everything here is working. It should be, but I'm not 100% sure that all worked. Anyways, I really don't have time for anything special today at all. I have a hard out that is earlier, which that is, I guess, perhaps too inside baseball term, but it just means I've got to leave at a very specific time, which means we're already anticipating abruptness and shortness for today's stream, which is the worst way to start any stream, is to just immediately lower expectations. But what I'm going to do, and today is kind of a great day to experiment with this, is basically just do one game of Yu-Gi-Oh! In favor of not actually changing the title. So it still will be one game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Today. And then immediately I'm going to go into big news. I'm probably not going to be as well thought out or opinionated on that big news. And then immediately we're just, after that, going to try and go through all the new games and all the headlines and just be done with this. This will be an experiment on how abrupt can I be, in particular, or abridged can I be. Let's see, this skill drain we already did, and so we would still be just struggling with this. We'd still just be struggling with this dual tryout, triangle duel thing that I'm not having a lot of success with. My best hope here is that I would find some extra time to play it off screen, which I probably won't, and or people would just start getting worse at the game. There is a possibility that for these tournaments there might be a ranking system here, and as it continues to go on, they put the lower skilled players together, making it easier for a average skilled player to beat them, and then they put all the top tier high skilled players at the top, and it may just take a while to sort that out if there is any kind of internal ranking metric that is unique for the tournaments. It is very possible also though that it's just completely random placement. For the catch-up section, I finally finished Hand of Fate 2. It's a lot of grinding off screen, not really a lot to say. I would say maybe the final boss fight is a little bit better, but it still is very much a case where Hand of Fate 2 sells itself like it is going to be a deck building RPG tabletop game, and in reality that secondary game mechanic of just hack and slash and button mashing plays way too much of a factor and really should just not exist at all. The way Hand of Fate should have been made is that there should have been just dice rolls that occurred when you ran into an encounter and had a fight. Or there should be no cards and no tabletop element at all, and it should just be a narrative fantasy game. Either one would have been kind of fine. They pigeonhole themselves with a good title like Hand of Fate and then don't really deliver on what that game really should be. But yeah, I finished Hand of Fate 2, and then I managed to record, I believe, 2 episodes of Fallout New Vegas. Fallout New Vegas has a lot of red flags in the discussion forums about crashing. So far, in about 2.5 to 3 hours of gameplay, it hasn't crashed on me yet. It actually looks incredibly nice for a game that, according to Steam, came out in 2001. It does have this sepia tone of yellows and browns film all over it, and by default it has an amber color for the Pip-Boy, and instead of the Fallout 3 green. You can change that. You can't change the amber coloring of the menus, but you don't go into menus enough for that to be an issue. the game is incredibly dark. I quickly kind of found that I should turn it up 4 notches on the brightness scale. I entered one schoolhouse, and there's only like one slight corner that is lit up, and there's all these insects attacking me, and I just cannot see the textures on the wall at all. So yeah, I'm sure my viewers will appreciate me turning up the brightness, although I did that like halfway through the second episode. So that first episode is going to be a little bit dark. It is Fallout New Vegas compared to Fallout 3 is a different experience, and compared to the Fallout TV series, it's a different experience. There's just seems to be less of an emphasis on the nuclear aspect and Nuka-Colas, and the Pip-Boy character. New Vegas feels like an area that just wasn't as affected by the nuclear fallout. There are some mutated creatures, but there's kind of slightly different mutated characters than what you saw in Fallout 3, which is good, just add some variety to everything. But I'm barely into the tutorials. There's a lot of things I think that are in even Fallout New Vegas that are just old-fashioned concepts that don't work in modern gameplay, and frankly barely worked even when they came out back in the day. And so I do think that there's an issue there where spending an hour setting up your special skills and your stats and not really knowing what any of that does. Fallout games, one of their major mistakes, and Skyrim fortunately doesn't really go down that direction, but one of their major mistakes is definitely that they I have no idea what I'm doing, by the way, in case you couldn't tell. Fallout games throw the special stats at you without giving you any kind of information as far as what the perks and the traits, and there's just too many things. And New Vegas even makes it worse because they have magazines which are temporary boosts to your skills, and then they also have comic books that are permanent boosts to your skills. So yeah, and there's still just way too much vendor trash and junk, but it does seem like at first glance the bullets play a much bigger role, and Fallout New Vegas is going to play, I think, more like the Metro games, where bullets may very well be a currency. You're going to have to craft your own bullets. You're not just going to pick them up and find them like you would in Fallout 3. And I'm not sure if that concept really carries over to Fallout 4 or not. Probably doesn't. So I've been wasting so far a lot of bullets shooting small insect-like creatures, trying to level up. There are still mistake choices like skipping ahead one level and just spending a trait or perk, or using one of the limited perks, since there's a max level you can level up your character. Wasting that to just level up again is pointless. or wasting a perk to get accelerated experience to level up is pointless. For the most part, I'd say at least 80% of all the perks in New Vegas are the same ones from Fallout 3. But there's a few that look like they're new. The funny thing here is if I can have a decent experience with Fallout New Vegas and not spend too much time on it, I could see myself then just marathoning to Fallout 4, and by the time I finish New Vegas, Fallout 4 may be patched enough to a point where it's reasonable to play that again. But yeah, right now Fallout 4's on PC is not really in the best shape to play it. My footage will almost certainly air months past the point at which anybody cares about the Fallout TV series, but whatever. I'm never gonna be fast enough to pull off those kinds of tricks. Like, yeah, I could have started playing Fallout New Vegas the second they announced the Fallout TV series, and probably should have, and then held on to that footage to start airing the exact same day it came out on Amazon Prime. That would have been the smart move, but I didn't do it, so whatever. I think in between the last stream, since today's Monday, and last one would have been Friday, I also was testing out Minecraft, the Java edition, on my Steam Deck, and I was only intending to test it out for a brief moment, and I did spend about an hour and a half playing it. I eventually said I'll just go first to Iron, just to dig down deep enough to get to Iron, and then that'll be an achievable enough goal as far as testing the Steam Deck. Now, to get Minecraft to run on the Steam Deck, the Java edition, is a little bit more difficult, particularly if, in my case, you've forgotten the Microsoft login password, which they're not particularly good about emailing you fast enough when you say you've forgotten the password. So if it takes like 5 minutes to get that email, in my case, I might have moved on to the next thing by then. But yeah, ignoring the password part, the recommendation on the Steam Deck is to get the flat pack from the Discovery Flat Hub installer called Prism Launcher. You're effectively then giving that app third-party access to your Minecraft Microsoft account, and it will log in for you. The Prism Launcher, you then set it up to, if you wanted to put any mods or anything on it, but even basically you still set it up, and then you right click that one world instance you're thinking about playing and you're generating, and you put a desktop icon. You right click, add to desktop in desktop mode on Steam to make that desktop icon. Then you right click that desktop icon on the desktop in desktop mode to add to Steam, and then you have the desktop game on Steam. I, at that point, would recommend deleting the desktop shortcut because it's not going to really work for you unless you're just aware that you're going to be playing with an external keyboard and mouse for WASD. Remember, Minecraft does not support controllers at all. Now, on the Steam Deck, you can get around that by going into gaming mode, which I went into big picture mode on the Steam Deck to see if maybe that was the same as gaming mode. It looks very similar, but it is not the same. Gaming mode is a completely different desktop environment login, from what I can tell, So you are just like logging out of the Plasma desktop environment and logging into something else at that point. And so let's just fast forward through one of these to get the reward today, also while I'm talking. Once you get to back to gaming mode, then you have to click the little controller icon, then click community, and find there should be a fairly popular like 34 thumbs up layout for Steam Deck controller compatibility, and that works pretty good. It effectively is mapping the WASD to the D-pad or the analog stick, maybe both, and then just mapping a bunch of other things to the right buttons, or what would feel like natural buttons, so that you can play Minecraft with the controllers on the Steam Deck. And yeah, once you have that compatibility, controller layout setup, everything works good in gaming mode. But unfortunately, the Steam Deck does not have a way, command line wise, to make a shortcut in desktop mode to swap the controller layouts in desktop mode. And so there just isn't really a way to swap the controller layouts in desktop mode at all. In fact, even if you click the launch button in the Steam library for the Minecraft that is a non-Steam game in desktop mode, it's not going to swap the controller layouts for you. Which is just another example of where they have not put any real focus or attention into desktop mode, that they just don't consider that the issue. So that is why I would suggest deleting the icons from the desktop mode, and just saying you have to be in gaming mode to do that. It should be fairly easy to have like a command line switch that would say go into gaming mode, then launch this app, but that doesn't seem like that's possible. Maybe there's a trick you could do there, but maybe not. And then there's just doesn't seem like there's a command line switch where you can say Steam launch this app with this controller configuration. And those should all be very basic things. Anytime you see an application do something in one way and not do it in the other, even without having any programming knowledge, you can fairly confidently say that that can be done and should be programmed to be done that way. Speaking of perhaps overconfidence, somebody commented on one of my YouTube shorts that are automatically mated, showing off new games that have come out, calling it the laziest piece of video they'd ever seen, or something to that terms. And so I jokingly, half trollingly, said I sure spent a lot of time on programming programs, macros, and custom CSS for these lazy videos. And the guy didn't get it. The person didn't get it, and responded back and goes, just because you spend a bunch of time on something doesn't mean it works. Learn from it, move on, have a good day. Like, oh, I'm winning an argument here. Which, I'm not just mentioning this just to dunk on somebody who seems to not really realize that other people watch YouTube shorts and like them. Inherently, that is always the argument around YouTube shorts, is that there's some audience out there that likes them, even if you don't know that person or can't comprehend why that person does like them. The views themselves scream somebody likes them. And when people comment on YouTube, including myself on the rare occasion when I comment, it's always important to keep perspective and realize, hey, these videos are getting hundreds of views, thousands of views, millions of views potentially. So somebody is watching it and getting something from it and liking it. And it is not just a video that has been custom built for you or custom built for me. But yeah, it definitely feels like there are some people that have decided to show their narcissism by assuming that they're in one-on-one relationships, or that they are acting like they are the boss of content creators. At a certain level, the masses, the wholes, your entire viewership is your boss. But if it's literally only one person watching your videos, that still doesn't really make them the boss in that form. It just means the content creator themselves are the bosses, or nobody's the boss, because you don't really have a job at that point if you're only making videos for one person. Which I definitely have been there in the past, where videos have really only gotten one view or no views, and still today get some videos that just get no views. Like my Lord of the Rings the adventure card game series right now is airing to no appeal whatsoever, and that is probably just an indication of how oversaturated Lord of the Rings is, or maybe how the algorithm has decidedly been programmed to not promote anything with Lord of the Rings in the name. On that aspect, I think I also am going to give up on the emojis in the front. I thought it was a cutesy thing, but I think it probably is hurting me and the algorithms, just because most people don't use emojis, and the large language modules is probably connecting words and phrases that don't have emojis. So yeah, the artistic creativity there being hampered and hurt by the capitalistic need to actually get views, in the hopes of being monetized and having ad revenue at some point. But yeah, suffice it to say, the YouTube Shorts will not stop. Not until I have a better idea. If somebody made a suggestion on, hey, here's what you can do with your content that would be super easy and you can just automate it all and you'd get even more views, then I would definitely hear that. But I think I have a pretty good system here for no extra amount of work, really, and it is getting me hundreds of extra views. Not that views really matter on shorts that much. But yeah, I am open to suggestions of new things to do. I am not open to suggestions of pack it in and go home suggestions, which is that's where you may accidentally turn yourself into a troll, is when you're just saying this is bad and you should stop doing it. Well, you're not adding anything constructive at that point, and people are not being taught and have never really been taught to be constructive in their criticism. And so the right response to non-constructive criticism is to simply ignore it or troll it. The funny thing is, you can really troll it and just get the person mad and get them posting 5 or 6 responses to get even more engagement. That is the other option, but then that also can backfire and show yourself as a troll. Some things happening at YouTube. First of all, this YouTube advertising was promoting the Google Newfront advertising convention. This is basically a get-together with advertisement companies, wining and dining them, and so that just happened. And at the exact same time, roughly, Google has laid off its entire Python team and several other groups of people. Now, the question there is, do we think this is a case where Google has realized that having a Python team is no longer necessary and may very well have never been necessary, considering how Python is at best a learner language for little kids to learn programming, and not really a language that anybody serious should be programming. Now, for all I know, the Python team for Google was working on Python to work with like Google search APIs, or to help kids do things like that. I doubt they were doing AI programming with Python, and that almost certainly may have been a factor. However, there is another possibility, a very reasonable possibility. There were those Google employees that staged a sit-in and got fired, and maybe the Python team was just the aftermath of Google realizing we have too many highly political, highly opinionated employees who would stage a sit-in and disrupt work, and so we need to just get rid of anybody who is going to be opinionated and loud, and only keep the best workers, or the workers who will keep their head down for fear of being fired, like any other job has done many times in the past. So yeah, it could be either, it could be both, it could be a little bit of both, it could be neither. But yeah, layoffs are happening, and there's definitely less prestige these days for working at Google than what it seemed like you would have gotten a few years ago. People are now really realizing that a lot of the jobs at Google were kind of simplistic and busy work. Same way with Valve too, you know. If somebody told me they worked at Valve, that wouldn't look really good on their resume. They would have to try and justify it, saying they did a major amount on like Half-Life Alyx to show off that they had any talent at all, because it's very possible. Same is true with Microsoft also. It's very possible to work at these companies and just be a low-level documenter, bug fixer, a QA tester, customer service agent, tech support, just fixing broken printers and things like that. Nothing amazing. That's why you probably, if you want to go into programming, should try to cut your teeth in development operations. DevOps, as it's called, at least at the beginning. Have some major project that you can put on a resume and show off with, even if you move out of DevOps. But yeah, the new things that are created from scratch look way better. And yeah, if you're not in DevOps, you certainly can have projects that you can highlight too, but you definitely want to document that. Unfortunately, a lot of jobs, whether IT jobs or otherwise, are very much, I flipped burgers every single day for 8 hours for 15 years, and that is very hard to phrase in a glowing way on a resume if you're just doing the same thing over and over again. So my recommendation in any job is, the second you do anything different from your job description, anything special, anything extra, document it, have that be a special thing you can talk about on your resume. Video Games Chronicle says Tencent has increased its shareholding in Remedy to almost 15%. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a case where every time Remedy has to pay the bills, every quarter or so, they're in talks with Tencent to get some cash. Or, you know, there may be no talks at all. It may just be Tencent is desperate to have more business outside of Chinese control, and so they're investing in companies that they think would be fairly successful. I don't know if there's a great reason to think Remedy will be fairly successful at this point, though. There's just this general idea of a Control 2 and a general idea of an Alan Wake 3, and that's kind of it. Like, nothing's been announced, and I imagine sales aren't going to go up otherwise. Square Enix is working on a fix for Final Fantasy XVI bug that can prevent game progress. They are apparently putting high priority on that, which that makes some sense. There was a rumor over the weekend, and they finally confirmed it. This is from GameDeveloper.com, that the LucasArts veteran Matt Shell has passed away. Shell contributed to the success of Star Wars titles, including Jedi Survivor, Battlefront, and Empire of War. This is a weird photo to take at any job, to have 5,832 days of work at Lucasfilm, and this was in 2019. Like if you were retiring, maybe you would take that picture, but I just don't know why you would hold up a piece of paper instead of maybe taking the photo and then putting a frame with a metal label on the bottom, or even photoshopping the text in after the fact. I think it makes a lot more sense just to tell him to put his arms down and smile and take a picture. Not even a great picture. The sun is too high in the sky, so it's putting a lot of shadows on his face. But yeah, apparently Jeff Keighley shared this information, which Jeff Keighley, I don't think has ever really done that before, so maybe he knew him more intimately. And I imagine we also will just not get any idea as to what he passed away from. And pretty much every time we see these obituaries, it really just highlights the name of somebody that we as gamers generally just don't know. So every single video game for decades now has had credits, but the credits have failed miserably to really inform an audience or encourage an audience to know the names of people that worked on the games they like, other than the celebrity, usually directors or producers of games, who try to hog all the credit, and there's only maybe a dozen of those names that we recognize. So yeah, until we start seeing big obituaries for George Lucas himself, or Akira Toriyama, the maker of Dragon Ball Z, there clearly was much more of a larger group of anime fans who knew Akira Toriyama and revered him. That being said, they wouldn't even probably announce the death of somebody who maybe was a third keyframe animator or an in-between animator for the Dragon Ball series, or somebody who just like animated for one episode. Those kinds of animators won't ever get credit. So yeah, there's still a real problem there, and I still really do think that there probably should be a Library of Congress rule in which you must legally file credits for every single piece of creative art with every single employee working there. Something with the National Labor Review Board working with that, and the IRS working with that too. Like, you could get those three organizations to kind of communicate internally to say, hey, we need to know the credits of who worked on what and when, for historical sense, for the sake of society. Completely. You can't hide employees or pretend like employees are doing nothing anymore. Yeah, you have a fairly long post here, most of which seems to be just other people talking about him, and apparently he was brand marketing, the director of brand marketing at the Walt Disney Company, Well, if that's the case, then maybe we'll see some different brand marketing happening at Disney, which would probably be for the better. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says a peripheral firm claims the Switch 2 Joy-Cons use electromagnetic suction and have extra buttons. It also claims the new hardware can connect wirelessly to existing Joy-Cons. The Joy-Cons are just Bluetooth with their own proprietary protocol. Yep. I don't know what electromagnetic suction means. Seems to be perhaps a mistranslation there. And it weirdly just feels like if the new Joy-Cons really do work that way, it seems like what they're really going for here is just a no edges approach aesthetically in favor of having good physical connections. Yeah, I was assuming that maybe it was going to flip magnets around and align them in such a way electronically so that there would be a magnet array along the edge, and that it would flip those magnets and spin them on a motor so that they would all line up and stick passively without using any more power after that initial flip. But that still probably wouldn't stop them from being yanked off if you pulled hard enough. And it does certainly bring about the question about whether you can hold the Switch by the grips being magnetically held. The slides here, the metal, really did have a good firm grip on the Switch, so you could comfortably hold the Joy-Cons and not fear that the Switch is going to slide out and break on the ground. And I just don't know why you'd get rid of that. Then the other question is, how do you charge the Joy-Cons at that point? Because that almost then brings about the question, are they going back to batteries? Which, if they went back to batteries in the controller, would they go back to batteries in the whole system? No way. There's no way you would be able to put enough AAAs in a Nintendo Switch 2 for it to make sense. Yeah, that wouldn't happen. So it's not like you could ship it without having that battery warning on the labels in the United States that they now mandate. So you'd have to assume that there's some kind of wireless charging, probably a proprietary wireless charging, or some kind of metal contact when you magnetically attach it, if it really is magnetic. Now, having extra buttons, I don't know what other extra buttons you could really have. Maybe some back buttons, and that's about it. Because there's already pretty much a full array of buttons on the Joy-Cons. So, unless they want to go for like a fight stick layout, which still wouldn't really make any sense. So I question that. Remember, there's a high possibility here this is just a peripheral firm just making up nonsense. And it's kind of pointless to speculate anyway, so let's just move forward. Tekken 8's second DLC character and upcoming free updates have been revealed, according to Video Games Chronicle. I assume Tekken 8 is still popular amongst the fighting game people. Larry Herb, I'm still following him, retweeted that the overpriced expansion memory is on sale now. 2 terabytes for $229.99, which if you were to buy an NVMe for 2 terabytes, you'd probably be paying roughly $160, so it's still fairly overpriced. I am glad that this proprietary connector expansion slot concept has not gone anywhere. Microsoft has not spent any energy to make it go anywhere, as far as saying, let's get laptop manufacturers or motherboard manufacturers to support this kind of expansion slot. Otherwise, Larry Herb is not really doing much to interest me, so we will just move on from that. Now, I talked about in the last stream this YouTuber with 1 million plus followers who teaches people how to program came back from retirement to do Godot engines, where previously he was doing Unreal Engine tutorials. And so now he has put out a mega tutorial on how to make a game in Godot, which was really only an hour and 30 minutes, and I imagine there is probably going to be a case where he goes into more detail in a long time, in a longer series, but maybe not. YouTube gaming is still being pathetic. Just they basically do the same thing every few weeks. Describe a game you're currently playing using only emojis. And basically there's nothing else of interest worth even mentioning. There's another YouTuber, I have no idea who this is even. There's another YouTuber who's been on YouTube for 14 years. No idea who that is. Wanted to go ahead and translate this one. Let's go ahead and translate this to English. So, Key Development Room, makers, I think, and part of the Clannad visual novel series, tweeted this out. Clannad 20th anniversary. Clannad was released on April 28th, 2004. 20 years have passed since then. One of Key's most representative titles, I feel, that is still loved by everyone. This year is the year of Key 25th. We will continue to push forward. So, yeah, they announced a 25th that it came out 20 years ago, but there seems to be no intention of doing anything on its 20th anniversary, which, in fairness, since it is a visual novel, there's not really too much you could do there that needs to be done. You could try and redo the art, but not much would really have changed at that point. Here is when this story must have been updated. See, seems like he was credited with 60 games. The easiest thing you could do here is have a list of all the games he worked on. And worked for over 20 years, which is not even that long for a career. The general thought in America is you should be working between the age of pre-18 years old to past 65 years old. So you're talking 45 years working in some job. And there is a fiction, certainly there are 45 years at the same job. But in the game industry, that number is way less so far. Video Games Chronicle says as Silent Hill 2 remake approaches, Bluebird Team says it's very confident with the final game. That is the right thing to say if you're going to say anything. That being said, what are you going to say? Like, it would be crazy to say you weren't confident in it. And then let's see, 2K Sports apparently was running into some kind of bugs, and they respawn. Players were having difficulty to online modes across 2K titles, including Top Spin. They looked into it, and then probably a few hours later, they said they have fixed it. And then the last thing I wanted to point out, these 3 games from Capcom are going to be delisted, I believe, on the 9th. And that is Dark Void Zero, which noticeably is received pretty poorly on Steam, 43%, and I already own it. And you really would only have that if you were going to play Dark Void, which also is received pretty poorly. So you can kind of see why you would just delist low performers. But why not just leave them historically there? Unless this is going to be some weird attempt by Capcom to delist a game from Steam, wait a while, and then relist it on Steam. Maybe even calling it a remaster when it really isn't. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe there's some music licenses or some concepts there that, as far as copyright license, that they are not willing to renew. Dark Void Zero and Dark Void from different developers, it seems. So that doesn't seem like it is just a developer issue alone. And then the third game, weirdly, which is the one game I don't own, is called Flock. And it is from a third developer, but same publisher. 80% positive. It looks like a fine game. But there is definitely an argument here to not buy it. At this point, well, it had a record low of 99 cents, which is where it would be reasonable to buy it. Right now it's $3.04. And in the last 2 years, it's only been as low as $2.49. So I think I probably will just miss this. I wouldn't be surprised if this is very much a publisher deal, and that is certainly the other option here, where we may see Flock get delisted by Capcom as the publisher, and then the rights may just revert to Proper Games, and they may just self-list it, and then you could pick it up there historically. And then when I bought these games, I think they were pretty mixed reviewed even then, so I probably just wasted my money on them, because I almost certainly won't ever play these, as far as Dark Void and Dark Void Zero. And in fairness, I'm just not ever going to be, nobody is going to be able to be a curator of every single game on Steam, like in the sense of owning every single game on Steam. The only people that would be able to do that would be people that have all game access accounts, which I don't think there are that many people in the world on Steam that even have that. Which that again highlights the need for preservation, because I, as a video game critic and a YouTube content creator, should not have to try and have my own personal library of video games when there really should just be a case for old games and games that you may only want to check out for like a historical research project. Those should be available in some kind of online library, which we once again know that the ESA has told its members, or the ESA's members has told the ESA they will not support. Moving on, so all the new games on Steam, we'll go through this. Here we have a Toho game that's already on the fall list, so I probably am going to make duplicate YouTube shorts on that, but in abundance of caution, I'm not going to do anything. There is still some desire here. This looks like this might be an interesting puzzle game. Yeah, there's still a desire to see if there's some way I could speed up things. Here we have what looks very much like an adult game. Once again, not being put in the adult section. I guess maybe if I could modify the HTML code, because these screenshots they move over on their own, don't they? Yes. Very slowly, the screenshots will move over on their own, which means there's a number there in the programming, which means all I have to do is figure out the code to the number and increase the speed. And then what would happen is I would get to a page like this and it would just be doing something like this, which that's about the speed I would want the images to flip through. Barely 600 milliseconds of time, just enough to get a glimpse of it and move on. And that would save me so many clicks. So there is yet another programming concept. I'm gonna give this a chance. Another programming project for me to waste my time on. And like all projects, it seems like it would be really easy to do at the moment, and in reality it's gonna run into problems. This looks like one of those Chinese fake porn live action games, where fake porn in the sense that there will be some implied lewdness at best, and there actually won't be anything because it's a Chinese game and porn is not legal in China. I'm not sure anybody actually liked these toys these days. Back when they were the only option before Legos were a big thing, these were kind of interesting, but unless you're 60 or 70 years old, you probably never even played with those toys originally as a kid, so you won't have any nostalgia. Same is kind of similar with Lincoln Logs. Like, unless you're in your 50s or 60s, that wouldn't have been the coolest, newest toy. And Lincoln Logs in their own, in the abstract, are just not that interesting. Give this a chance. Those kind of construction toys, I think, also kind of have fallen apart as being interesting, in that there are just less people who think they would even grow up to be in construction, and what being in construction these days means is working with power tools and vehicles more than it means chopping down trees and building log cabins or assembling nuts and bolts and rivets. This is probably nothing, but I'll give it a chance. Oh, it's this part of the stream, never mind, says Pretzel. Ouch. Yeah. I really should just get rid of Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point completely. Like, there's too many people who feel the need to vocalize that they don't like the parts that aren't a Yu-Gi-Oh! The parts that aren't a Yu-Gi-Oh! Are the parts that I want to do. So we are just at this impasse at this point, and so I should just pull the trigger and say no more Yu-Gi-Oh! At all. Probably would still play it. I probably would still use the background music until I figured out some other background music, but yeah. But yeah, I'm getting closer and closer to that decision of just getting rid of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I definitely am not going anywhere in the opposite direction. But yeah, pretty obviously here I need to find a different audience. Well, this game catches my attention, but it's not English supported. It looks like a mobile gacha game, basically. Wait, these are some pretty bad screenshots too, just hiding what the game is in favor of just showing off the anime waifus. I'm a little surprised we don't see more games like that. Oh yeah, I suppose it is also worth pointing out that the Steam beta, on the Steam Deck in particular, did put out some updates, but nothing really massive. Like, there's still some major problems happening there as far as the Steam Deck's operating system and SteamOS in general. And I'm all for them incrementally improving it every couple weeks, but there is also an argument to be made that they need to make big improvements, like every couple weeks. The real move is they need to just have more programmers being forced to actually work on things and have things actually be improved upon. And I do suspect that there is a case where some employees at Valve get assigned to work on something and then there's just no real boss or manager following up. And they basically say this themselves, that there's no real boss or manager, or they try to give that impression when they really should have a boss or manager. This looks terrible. So what can happen is that a bug can get assigned to somebody, and then that person either stops working at Valve completely, or they just don't work on that bug and nobody follows up on it. And that may be very much a problem with their internal bug system, that there's just no timers or warnings on that saying, hey, this is a stale issue, nobody has followed up on it, we should assign it to somebody else and see if something happens. Like, what you really want to get down to is if somebody files a bug report, you respond one way or the other fairly quickly. One of those being, we're not going to fix it at all, a won't fix response, or we're going to start working on this, and it has been read and received and in progress. And then after a week or so, if you haven't made any progress, you should be updating people and saying, hey, we're still working on this, or this looks like this is going to take longer. Give some feedback and have a counter to really check on things. What you don't want is issues like the Steam client preventing, or at least sending the signal that is in part preventing the screensaver from activating, be an issue for years and years and years, even if it is just the same issue popping up over and over again. Now, I've done something to my Steam Deck, so now in desktop mode, the Steam client seems like it does let the screensaver go. I think in part what might be the problem is that the controller has a sleep setting inside of the desktop client of the Steam Deck, and so you probably want to change that. So in the desktop client of the Steam Deck, in desktop mode, you should say the controller timeout is 5 minutes, just like the shortest amount of time, or 1 minute, whatever you can get it, so that probably don't set it to 0, because that probably just means leave it awake all the time. And so it might be preventing the system from going to sleep because of that setting, and it may just be a case of it not really explaining that well as to why that is happening. That may very well be the issue. course, there's another issue in that when the Steam Deck beta updated, it changed my time zone. And so I've changed the time zone a couple of times, and it seems to just want to change it back. Now on Linux, that maybe there just is a time zone setting somewhere else that is overriding that, but yeah, it's obviously not interconnected correctly. Not that time zone really matters too much to me. The Decky plugin for the Steam Deck, I'll also mention this, got an update, so it started to work a little bit better now with the Steam Family Beta version of the client, and where it wasn't working at all before. And in that, there is one plugin I installed that was screen time, and so I had it where it was supposed to pop up a notification that you've been playing for 30 minutes or so, and it just blacked out the screen. I'm not sure it really paused the game as it was blocking out the screen, and so I really didn't like that. So I would recommend, if you are going to use screen time, have it not pop up any alerts. It'll still track how long you're playing on games, but yeah, the reminder is an interesting concept, but to do it correctly, you probably just need some kind of ding in the headphones, just like a little ding bell, not a full screen notification that could have you die if you're in the middle of an intensive fight in the game because the screen goes black and you can't click on any buttons for a second. And it definitely doesn't feel like the screen time app is waiting for any kind of like idle time where you're not pressing buttons. So here we have the SteamDB charts. Fallout 4 still doing fairly well. The character customization in Fallout New Vegas is fairly lackluster, and weirdly, one of the characters you can create is Caucasian race, which canonically I don't think that really makes sense, because my understanding from Fallout 3 is that America was at war with China, and so pretty much any Asians would not really be treated well or be welcome in the Fallout universe. So the idea that you could just randomly customize your character to be Caucasian and then not comment on that is a little surprising. I'm still frankly surprised that the African American character class isn't commented more on that. Like, it definitely, from the Fallout TV series, feels like there was just no more racism in America before the bombs fell, and that's hard to believe, but okay, that's a different way of doing things, at least as far as African Americans were concerned. That they were all just anti-China, anti-communist, and it doesn't work that way. It's not like when the United States in the real world went to war with Japan and had heavy racism and focusing on Japanese people and Asians in general. It's not like they started treating the black people better. No, that racism still exists. People who are taught racism as children tend to keep it their entire life and often pass it on for generation after generation. And I don't think even introducing ghouls post Fallout, post the bombs falling, would have unified the survivors. But we can see Fallout 76 is also being played and heavy. And even Fallout New Vegas is in number 39, and that's what I'm playing. But yeah, when you look at these screenshots here, you can see how sepia toned and yellow all the screenshots are for that game. Compare the screenshots of Fallout 76, and it's still a little sepia toned, but it's slightly warmer, more reds. And Fallout 4 in particular, and I kind of feel like Fallout 4 and the Fallout games should be more blue and warm tone. And that, yeah, Fallout 4's color palette I think is probably where it should be at. But yeah, there's still just not anything else out at the moment to compare that to say that this is the new game. You may get a new game pretty quickly. You can see Apex Legends is falling down, the Rocket Blade Point is falling down. Some of these other games are bouncing back up. When you see GTA in particular bouncing back up, that tends to be an example of there not being anything new or interesting. Manor Lords, I guess, is the one exception to that is new. And you can see their numbers are going up. But they're also not skyrocketing like Palworld did, nor are they likely to plummet like Palworld did. And as far as Steam is concerned, I guess the Activision publisher sale is still going on. Manor Lords does look like it is the game of the moment to talk about. Yeah, and it definitely does feel like it saves me an hour by not doing Yu-Gi-Oh! In these streams, which is what I needed to do today, although I still have that danger. Sandland is new and trending, but we can see it's very positively reviewed. But it does kind of also suck that some of the biggest new and trending games are just next to things like pools, which look like meme games, although that is also overwhelmingly positive. So it seems like there may be a genuine audience now of people, not just streamers, playing meme games, that may just have what once was a meme has actually become realistic. VR has gotten squished much lower on the front page. It's almost completely at the bottom. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some VR sales in the summer sale, if the summer sale even happens, and that'll just be the end of it. They'll just sell VR sets and then never really mention VR again. They'll probably always have VR headsets for sale, but I don't think Valve is going in that direction anymore. The Steam Deck is a much better direction. I was listening to DF Retro earlier today, and they talked about how Fallout 4, I think, may have been Steam Deck verified, and then there was just this real question as to what Steam Deck verified really means, because a lot of things, more things than should, have been verified for Steam Deck and still seem like they don't really run well or play well. Right, and so that's going to bring us to the headlines very quickly. We don't even have that many today, so this may be just a short and sweet hour and 30-minute stream. Let's see how this goes. Square Enix is working on a fix for Final Fantasy XVI bug that can prevent game progress. Street Fighter VI 4th DLC character Akuma is coming in May. I think Akuma is a very popular character in Street Fighter. House Marquee teases a new announcement ahead of Returnal's 3rd anniversary. New image posted on X suggests some news is coming on Tuesday. I don't know what I really even care for House Marquee to say there. Like, Returnal got a lot of promotion, a lot of mainstream video game journalists talked about it, and it still didn't really break out as a success. It really didn't get people interested in playing it. And so if they were to re-release or remaster Returnal for a 3rd anniversary, I would be utterly uninterested in that. And I just don't think Returnal really sets much of a precedent to interest me in any kind of sequel or new game announcement. even if they announced something completely different, I would just treat it like, oh, here's an announcement from a game company I've never heard of before. So it's pretty much impossible for me to get hyped around Housemarque teasing an announcement. We'll see what the announcement actually is. If they were going to make like another Silent Hill spin-off game, even, that really wouldn't mean anything to me. So I guess I just have to move on. A peripheral firm claims the Switch 2 Joy-Cons use electromagnetic suction and have extra buttons. There is something to be said about the utilitarian style in which the Switch 1 is designed. It isn't as visually polished as, say, an iPad or what some of the previous designs of Nintendo consoles have been. Like, of course, Nintendo does kind of flip there in that the original NES is just a box, and then the second generation of the NES was much smoother and curved, and then the Super NES was just a box with perhaps some more polish on it. And then the GameCube was literally a cube, although technically I think the dimensions actually weren't a cube, and just a box again. And then the Nintendo 64 was more curved. The Wii was just a box again, and then yeah, so I guess maybe they've never polished things as much as they maybe should have for the exterior casings of their consoles. Yeah, it does seem like that might be the case. That maybe they want to do more of an Apple thing. And that would make a lot of sense too. Where are your Nintendo fans? They're kids who grew up with iPads and Apple products. So the competition aesthetically, as far as the external cases, is to have everything smooth and that perfect curved rounded edges, and follow that visual aesthetic. Moving on. Escape from Tarkov's studio attempts a partial U-turn on the $250 player versus event plans, but fans remain unhappy. The studio announced last week it was locking a new PvE mode behind a $250 edition of the game. Well, while I am never likely to play Escape from Tarkov, one of the elements of Fallout New Vegas with the bullet crafting mechanics does certainly make an argument that maybe I should play New Vegas and then play like either the Stalker series or the Metro series, whichever one has the bullet mechanics. I always confuse those two series, and then play Fallout 4 and just bounce between what could be 3 or 4 long-running RPG games. But yeah, that certainly is a thought that probably would burn me out. It probably would really go finish New Vegas, play Metro, then be burned out and don't play Fallout 4. But that would probably work better too. Anyways. Yeah, unless my Fallout series started to air and people started to watch those videos quite a bit, then playing Fallout 4 immediately after that makes some sense. But whatever. I doubt that would happen. Even then, that still would probably burn me out. Tekken 8's second DLC character and upcoming free updates have been revealed. This is Lydia from Tekken 7. I don't recognize her as a character, but whatever. One of the things about the custom character creation, which is pointless in Fallout New Vegas because you don't ever really see your character's face that often. There's a kind of cool haircut, but the haircut comes with this big scar on the side of their head. And I didn't want the scar on the side of their head. I was just reminded of that because this lady has a scar over her eye. You don't see too many characters with scars that are very prominent on their faces, particularly female characters in video games. But in reality, in the real world, you don't see too many people with scars on their faces, particularly female ones, because people can wear makeup and cover that up. Anyways, I don't think most players want that either. I think in the fantasy of video games, you want your characters to be blemish free for the most part. We don't even really see moles or beauty marks on characters, or freckles, or even bad tans. Moving on. Veteran LucasArts lead Matthew Schell has passed away. Schell was credited with over 60 games over 20 years, which that ratio is actually fairly high. Like 3 games a year is quite a lot. As Silent Hill 2 remake approaches, Bloober Team says it's very confident with the final game. We've heard your voices. The 2K has unbanned the popular WWE 2K24 modder. What's the status following the backlash? It took them quite a while to do that. Free status trended in the US and UK following the ban, which highlights a few issues here. First of all, maybe you don't ban somebody if there's any chance that they are a popular modder or a celebrity in any way, because they're going to raise a stink about it. Second, if you do choose to ban somebody, you have to stick to your guns, otherwise you're going to look weak. And now anytime anybody is banned, there's going to be a backlash and an expectation on that. And third, if you are going to ban somebody for legitimate reasons, communicate what those reasons are, first privately and then publicly if there is going to be a problem. But at this point, 2K has lost control of their own game effectively to the mob, which in fairness may be a better controlling organization for WWE 2K24, is just let the mob handle it. Yep. I don't know if I have anything else to really say there. There is some Stellar Blade news, and we'll talk about it if we don't see a headline here in a second, I guess. EA Sports FC 24 Premier League and WSL Team of the Season have been confirmed. And eFootball celebrates 750 million downloads with special events and items. Alright, so we'll go to the Komatsu articles before we talk about Stellar Blade off the top of my head if I have to. We have Hannah William on the chat saying, hey, don't you think that game is kind of similar? This game is kind of similar. Shadowverse? ? So I did play Shadowverse, and it is not that similar as far as, yes, they're both collectible card games to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. And I don't think I showed off any other card game. But maybe I did when I was going through all the new games on Steam. So I'm assuming you're meaning Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel versus Shadowverse. Yu-Gi-Oh! The collectible card game has been around for 25 years. It is by far a much older game than Shadowverse is. Shadowverse is a fine collectible card game, but it runs into some major problems in it. It has this half desire to also be a visual novel, so its single player story visual novel elements take way too much time, way more than the solo mode does in Yu-Gi-Oh! And there is kind of an attempt at being a little bit more narratively and visually consistent in Shadowverse compared to Yu-Gi-Oh, which just goes all over the place and does all kinds of different characters and art styles, and some card characters feel like they're from completely different universes than other card characters. They just don't really try to tell a visual narrative story. Compare that to like Magic the Gathering, where theoretically the planeswalkers in Magic the Gathering are summoning all of the monsters that exist in the Dungeons and Dragons universes in Magic the Gathering. So everything is supposed to be thematically from the same type of universes, the same fantasy themes in Magic the Gathering, and Magic the Gathering does a much better job at that. Let's see. Hannah says, I mean, not the whole game, but in some ways, lol. Yeah, you are right in it. The thing is, there's two ways to make a collectible card game. One is to make it like Magic the Gathering, which is what the Pokemon card game did, and then it's very familiar and is working on pretty established rule sets and ways of doing things. Cards have some form of attack and defense, and they have certain ways in which they can be placed, and they do certain effects. Draw new cards is a effect that almost every collectible card game has. Or you can make a collectible card game that is so out there and plays so incredibly differently that it won't get adapted, and it'll be this small niche thing that people will play every now and then, but it won't have that success like Magic the Gathering does, where you have people going to their local comic stores one day a week to play Magic tournaments, and they will constantly buy Magic card games. Most people want the sales like Magic the Gathering, so most people do just copy Magic, and as such, almost all of the card games are the same, and they don't succeed because they're not unique enough from Magic the Gathering. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! Slightly different. Card game made in Japan, where Magic wasn't that popular and had an anime behind it, so there's a lot more wild card effects that happened in Yu-Gi-Oh! And instead of staying within tight, consistent effect sets and key phrases and things like that. So you got, because of the anime in particular, cards that did some very wild and crazy things, and now Yu-Gi-Oh! Has like 10,000 cards that can combine to do lots of wild and crazy things. It makes a fairly unbalanced game and requires changing the rules or adding more cards because of power creep a lot more. But yeah, Shadowverse tried to keep it more simplistic and tried to go more for that Hearthstone concept where there's less effects, and tried to make it more of an anime visual fest by a modern anime style. At least they tried to do that originally. They at some point tried to reboot it and make it more of a kid-friendly, younger card game with an anime series, and made a completely different version of Shadowverse for the Switch. I'm not sure that really succeeded. And Hearthstone certainly hit on something by having a simplistic card set, but noticeably Hearthstone is digitally only and doesn't have to add that many cards. Like, over the years, I imagine there's probably less than 6,000 cards you could get in Hearthstone, and since it's all digital, it's pretty easy for every player to try to get all of them, and that makes for a more balanced thing. Of course, then they started adding completely different play styles to Hearthstone, and an auto chess battler feature, and people lost interest in Hearthstone for several reasons, some of which had nothing to do with the game. But yeah, that if you have a Japanese creator making a card game, they are going to be heavily influenced by Yu-Gi-Oh, because Yu-Gi-Oh it's just been in Japan and popular in the same way that if you're going to have a card game from the West be heavily influenced by Magic the Gathering. There are some card games out there that are nothing like Yu-Gi-Oh or Magic and play completely different, but there's just not a big enough fandom because it's a niche audience that wants to play card games in the first place. It's probably an audience that's only slightly bigger than Dungeons and Dragons fans, and very noticeably there is only Dungeons and Dragons and a couple other games that, as far as tabletop gaming, that people play. Hannah asked a while ago, by the way, what do you do in your spare time when you're not streaming? I really don't have any spare time because I should be pre-recording footage for my pre-recorded series and playing more video games, but I often don't do that because I'm a bad boss of myself. So I spend a lot of time watching YouTube. I've gotten into doing Sudokus and watching YouTuber people solve Sudoku variants that are very difficult and take about an hour to solve. I occasionally get into programming projects, and on a rare occasions these days I will actually finish some of those programming projects. Sometimes I have to program to make my YouTube content more automated and easier to make. So there's some of that. I'm working on I got a Steam Deck OLED version, so I'm working on trying to get that to be a better experience out of the box and make a custom setup for the Steam Deck, because it needs a decent amount of work if you're going to do a lot in the desktop. But yep. And then there's some non-YouTube stuff I don't talk about that take up my time, and I've been in this medium-sized emergency and I'm still recovering and dealing with that, and that has taken a lot of my time in the past 3 weeks or so. I sometimes watch like Amazon Prime and streaming services, but when I do that, it's usually a big waste of time to watch old shows. I was Hannah asks down here. Anyway, I mostly watch anime in my spare time when I'm not streaming. I was a huge anime otaku fan when I was younger in high school, and I have a shelf to the left of me with roughly 600 to 700 DVDs and Blu-rays, mostly DVDs of anime series, which probably was a huge waste of money, but also not a terrible investment considering a lot of these are not in print anymore. And I guess if I ever could get back to having free time, I could put these DVDs in a DVD Blu-ray player if I even owned one. All I have is a PlayStation 3 at the moment. I need to buy an upscaling 4K Blu-ray player, UHD player. And then, yeah, in my retirement I could watch these old 80s, 90s, early 2000 animes. As far as recent anime, I really don't watch any of that. One of the things certainly is the problem there is that a lot of those series are poorly handled on streaming services, and they very often, a lot of those series, if you engage with them quickly, they won't get second seasons. It's always been the case that there's been a lot of anime that aired in Japan and then you would have just had to read the manga to get the true ending, and those kinds of series often would not get carried over and dubbed and sold in the West outside of Japan. And so you would get this major filtering in the old days where only the best of the animes that had full seasons, had box sets, would be available for purchase even in the old days. and so I would go to the Right Stuff with 1f.com and buy a ton of box sets and Blu-rays back in the day. Nowadays, the rightstuff.com has been sold out to Crunchyroll, and so there really isn't a place unique to buy anime. You would just be buying it from Amazon.com. Amazon.com doesn't care if they ship you a dented, bent, nicked box set. So box sets won't even look that nice if they've been kicked around by the shipping people on your shelves, because they were always cardboard. And that was one thing that the Right Stuff did nicely, is that they knew they were sending anime to people who really wanted their box sets to look good, so they would put extra time and effort in packing things to make sure it wasn't bent up and kicked. And Amazon doesn't really care about selling DVDs so much these days, as they would prefer you to just watch it on Amazon Prime or Freevee with ads. But yeah, there was a point where I was watching anime with some friends, and when I got out of high school, those friends didn't have time to watch anime, and so it was pretty easy to fall out of that habit. But yeah, there was definitely a point where I was a big anime fan, and I'm still a huge anime fan. I don't hate anime now or anything like that, but I just don't spend the time to do that. In favor, I would rather make YouTube content. You can't really be a good and successful anime YouTuber because you'll get so many copyright claims and takedowns that at best you can pretend like you're an anime content creator and rarely talk about anime, and then do a whole bunch of other stuff to get people's attention, have a podcast, things like that. Trash Taste is an example of that, where you have 3 quote-unquote anime YouTubers where none of them really make that much content around anime or talking about anime, and instead they just have a podcast and it's just a group of friends talking. But yeah, I don't even know if I'd really enjoy being an anime YouTuber if you could do that, because I would just be criticizing the animes so much, and anime falls apart once you start to look at it with a critical eye. It is very much a thing. Turn your brain off, just accept the silliness, just accept the dumbness of some situations, and have your fun there. But yeah, that's pretty much all I do. Mostly the goal, if I was doing my job right, I would be playing at least 8 hours of video games for 2 pre-recorded time slots every Monday through Friday, to have my channel be like a TV channel where there is 2 or 3 hours of content every single day, on top of live streaming every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 2, 3, or 4 hours sometimes. I've got my YouTube shorts that I automatically make for new games, and that has gotten a lot of people's attention also. And you can't really change what your channel is about, so it has to be a video game channel at this point. And I would never become popular enough or have enough free time to make a second channel to do something different. I do occasionally talk about anime, and video games often are based on animes, so you have that. I do have some anime-like video games I want to play at some time. But yeah, I am much more of an old school anime fan. I would prefer to, say, go into a theater and see a re-release of Akira in theater than I would prefer to go in a theater and see a new release of a new anime movie, like a Fate Stay movie. And yeah, a lot of those movies don't get released in theaters in the West at all. But there definitely is some room for that, and where that could happen. Yeah, you could every year have Akira, Ghost in the Shell, some of those more longer movie standalone experiences in cinematic theaters. I've always thought in the back of my head about going to conventions, but I've never actually done it. I do have some nieces and nephews, and their parents are fairly conservative, so I would have to work on the parents to get them to let the kids go to an anime convention or watch anime in general. And right now my nieces and nephews are far too young for that. Like, I could show them some really young kids anime, but then there wouldn't be enough other anime to show them, so it just wouldn't make sense to even let them know that anime exists at this point. Once they're closer to 16-17-year-old edgelord teenagers, then at that point they probably will get an anime. They probably will already know what it is. I know one of my nephews wants to watch One Piece, and he has already been told by his parents that he's too young to watch One Piece, and I kind of agree with that. And there's not even that much in One Piece that's offensive, because there isn't actually, to my understanding, any romance. In One Piece, there's sometimes some nudity jokes, and some of the characters have like bikini tops, but even that, just at a glance, if somebody was walking over while he was watching One Piece, people would get the wrong impression. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. I need to wrap up because I really only have a few more minutes, so let's go back to the headlines here. A shoot-'em-up action roguelike game, Rising Heat, has been announced for PC. Let's see if we have a Steam link. This is the other thing that I just remembered I had said I needed to program, come to think of it, is there is no reason when my macro is opening all these headlines to not just scan the page for Steam links and open those pages automatically. Instead of every time I look at these headlines, I have to scroll down myself manually to look for a link that would either say Steam or Steam page on Komatsu always, and then link to the game. And I don't even have to care what it says. I could literally scan every single link in the page using my macro software and just see if the URLs to those pages go to a steam.com web page, because any other link like cooperative here will just not go to steam.com. Yeah, and those kinds of programming automations are the kinds of things that save me some time while streaming and make the streams more streamlined. May take me more time in the setup. It does take roughly 40 minutes to set up and open all these pages before I start streaming, and that's time in which my computer cannot be used to record other games or other footage. Moving on. Gundam Breaker 4 Launch Edition has been announced for the Americas. Again, look for a Steam link. Don't think I see one this time. Uncle Chop's Rocket Shop launches in November. This one's already on the follow list, which means I've seen it once before at least. Street Fighter 6 DLC character Akuma launches May 22nd. So it is both Street Fighter 6 has announced a DLC character, and the other fighting game has announced a fighting character. The adventure platformer The Smurfs Dreams has been announced for all consoles and PC. It seems to me like just occasionally making a Smurf game may be a way in which you can monetize the Smurfs. It is perhaps a little strange that there isn't some Smurf streaming cartoon on some servers, but there might actually be one and I'm just unaware of it. Tekken 8 DLC character Lydia Sobieska launches this summer. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce that last name. So yeah, that's the other fighting character. Guilty Gear Strive DLC character Slayer launches May 30th. So it almost feels like they have lined up all the fighting game announcements in a row, with Guilty Gear Strive also introducing something. Guilty Gear fighting series is one of these 2D more anime style fighting games that look different than the 3D fighting games, but certainly are still just fighting games, so that you have to be a fan of fighting games first before you could engage with them. Unlike, say, the Dragon Ball Fighter Z, where that feels like a game that you probably could play even if you're not a really good fighter game player. Musume Pretty Derby Party Dash launches August 30th. Not sure I pronounced that correctly either. Let's see. Is that coming to the West? This is the anime girls that are horse, so personifications of horses as anime girls running on a racetrack. Horse racing always uniquely popular in Japan. And this is being published by Side Games, the publisher of Shadowverse, also, for a little coincidence there. Fatal Fury City of Wolves adds Marco Rodriguez. So yeah, there's like 5 announcements of fighting characters. I almost wonder if this is because of EVO or because of EVO being canceled. I'm not sure if EVO got canceled or not. I don't think it did, but clearly this is Japanese fighting game announcement season for some reason. And I'm just not informed well enough as far as the fighting game community as to why that would be the case. Clearly we also don't have a lot of announcements of other kinds of games, either from the West or the East right now. I think Golden Week in Japan is about to happen, so we might get like a announcement then, either before Golden Week or several weeks after Golden Week. Probably not in the middle of Golden Week. The Quintessential Quintuplets Goto Pazu Story 2nd has been announced for the PS4 and Switch. So this may be the second Quintessential Quintuplets game that has been announced and released. It's a visual novel. Yeah. Increasingly, I expect visual novels to gain in popularity a little bit because of the Switch and because of the Steam Deck. They already have gained a decent amount of popularity because of the Switch and the Nintendo eShop. But yeah, still very much niche games, and for people who don't want to read or don't want to see anime moe characters, then that's not going to really work for that larger audience. Yeah, your Call of Duty Modern Warfare players unlikely to overlap with the visual novel fandom. Hunter x Hunter Nin X Impact first details, screenshots, and character trailers are available on Gamatsu. I think we've already covered this. This is more of a fighting game that might be more accessible to new players too. Of course, you may also still need to know the Hunter x Hunter anime series. And that is one thing as a gamer that there was always that risk. If I was going to play something like this, I would need to do too much research and watch the anime series or read the manga first to understand what's going on more completely. But usually the games stand on their own pretty well. The horror action game Alien Rogue Incursion has been announced for the PlayStation VR 2, Steam VR, and Quest 3. Alright, and that's going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com. And I think we've pretty much already talked about this, and this is yet another one of my macros that has been broken, so I don't actually have the stories open. Let's see. Roblox apparently has teamed with Walmart on a real-life e-commerce store within its platform. Ooh, so is that the idea that you might be able to spend Roblox to buy things at Walmart.com? At least that would be a way in which you could take Roblox out of the Roblox walled garden, which has been a major complaint, is that they've been trying to encourage kids to work what effectively was a real job to earn what effectively would be company script, which is illegal, to only be able to spend that company script on other Roblox assets and products and never take what would be real work and turn it into real money. And even if they did introduce Walmart as a partner there, you're still just getting a company script that can be used on Roblox content and Walmart content. You're not getting money that you could spend at any storefront for any reason. Which, yeah, that is not legal because that would collapse economies. Manor Lords has topped 1 million sales after netting 3.2 million wish lists. I don't know why you want to highlight the wish lists over the 1 million sales if the number's bigger. And let's see, Screen Australia has launched a new fund to support game festivals and events, which more games festivals and events in Australia could be the beginning of Australians pushing back on the high amount of censorship that happens in Australia. And I think that's pretty much everything we need to talk about. Obituary LucasArts veteran Matt Shell has passed away. So, yeah, before we wrap up here, I was going to talk about Stellar Blade. Noticeably, none of the mainstream video game journalists I follow, either Video Games Chronicle, Gamatsu, or GameDeveloper.com, has covered this, but after them claiming that there was going to be no censorship in Stellar Blade, there have been several instances of censorship, not massive censorship, but censorship nonetheless in Stellar Blade. And I don't know why anybody would have. I can see why people would have hoped, but Sony's track record pretty sure makes it obvious that they are pro censorship to the max, and it really would have been wise for people to not buy Stellar Blade until it comes to PC, but then also maybe it will never come to PC because it just won't sell that well. The first bit of censorship makes some sense, that you would patch out the accidental reference, if you even want to call it a reference, of the N-word by having random graffiti on a wall that says hard and then a sign for a shop called the R shop next to it. So if you disingenuously read those two, it would say hard R, which even that seems like a fair thing to say. I think on YouTube I could say hard R all day and I shouldn't get any kind of penalties or be censored for that, because you're actively going out of your way to not say the N-word explicitly and instead just referencing it. And so if references to bad words are also verboten, then you're creating such a high level of censorship, then you're saying then you can't even discuss the topic or bring the news to the people at that point, and that's just crazy. So then the other bits of censorship is that there was one version of the game that had a swimsuit outfit for Eve, the main protagonist, who all of her suits are fairly lewd, anyways. But this swimsuit had more of a plunging neckline and showed a little bit of that V-neck cleavage. And then the next patch covered up more of her chest. So clearly there was some censorship there. Now Shift Up is in a bad position because Sony is almost certainly telling them what to say and going to withhold payment if they don't toe the line and lie on behalf of Sony. Knowing Shift Up, I think almost certainly they wouldn't have bothered to make a more revealing outfit if they had not intended to use it in the first place. But Shift Up is effectively lying and saying that the more covered up version was the intended version, and they're basically saying we know the audience is going to have a hard time believing that because it is completely unbelievable. You just wouldn't have one version of the game showing off the costume and the cleavage more unless that was what you intended in the first place. And we've seen this in other games too, where there have been very quick patches to cover up more skin. And then the third bit of censorship is in that same patch, I believe. There were animated cutscenes where you would defeat an enemy and you would be covered in blood and gore. And then the amount of blood, splatter, and gore has been reduced. So it's not just lewdness and skin showing that's been censored. So, at this point, we'll probably hear even more forms of censorship, unless they've just censored everything they feel they need to. But the claims that there would be no censorship is out the window, and it really shouldn't have been believed in the first place, because if you're saying it will be the same in every country it's released into, and it's being released worldwide, then what you're really saying is no, yes, there will be a ton of censorship because we're going to boil everything down until it is bland and in the mushy middle of all the different censorship rules around the world, wherever the games are published. So not that much gore from the Sero ratings board, which is, I think, in Japan government affiliated, so that is a censorship board, and not that much nudity from the Chinese censorship board or any Middle Eastern country censorship boards. If you're trying to release it in the Middle East, I don't think Stillblade's really trying to release in the Middle East, or from the ESRB, which the ESRB technically not government affiliated, but still really a censorship board nonetheless, because they're controlling whether your game ends up in storefronts like Walmart, because the Walmarts and Targets follow the ESRB ratings and won't sell something unless it has an ESRB rating. So yeah, several countries don't like sex, several countries don't like blood and gore, thus the game is going to be censored to the mushy middle to not have either of those. So we now are in this position where Stillblade's still a great game, Sony's still a crappy game company that loves to censor. Jim Ryan, I guess, technically may still be in charge, but I don't think he actually is. So this may be the new Japanese interim president of Sony Interactive Entertainment that made these decisions. And yeah, it's caused a minor backlash because the blood, the gore, the lewd outfits, that's what Stellar Blade was selling itself on. And now there is this question about, should gamers boycott it and just see it fail, or should gamers loosely support it but not support it that much in the hopes that a PC release would come out at some point. The irony here is, financially the best thing to do would be for everybody to buy it and then hope that in the contract Sony would give the rights back to Shift Up after it sells a certain number of units and makes Sony as the publisher's money back, and then Shift Up would release a PC version of it themselves, or have a different publisher fund them to release a PC version that was censored, and just eliminate Sony from the equation. Now, if at some point that happened and Shift Up self-published the game on Steam and it's still censored, well, then we have to blame Shift Up, and then some weirdness has happened at Shift Up for some reason, because Shift Up is known for making 2 previous mobile lewd gotcha games, so why all of a sudden they would be pro-censorship wouldn't make any sense at all. And that's not who I believe Shift Up is as a company, as the CEO. I think the CEO has a love for lewd games, and that's why Stellar Blade looks the way it does in the first place. And yeah, in general, we probably should just buy Stellar Blade anyways and support it and send the message that there is a high demand and a paying audience for lewd games, so that Microsoft and Nintendo would also see that level of success and say the gamers have grown up and they are willing to buy more mature games, and so we don't need situations where we're being babied in video games, and we are not like we were in the past, where we're going to allow for sensationalist journalism around hot coffee mods being misreported as content that actually was in the game, when it was some content that was in the game, but you couldn't see that content unless you installed the mod, was really the hot coffee mod situation. We wouldn't have those kinds of controversies these days, and even if those kind of controversies did happen, gamers wouldn't care. Gamers would still buy games and nothing would come about from it. So yeah, that's the situation with Stellar Blade. Your best option, in my opinion, ignore the controversy, ignore the fact that there's some minor censorship. There's probably minor censorship in almost every game, and just enjoy it for what it is and play the game and purchase it and let it be a success to support Shift Up so they can make their next game, which they may very well make their next game from a different publisher and a completely different character, and Stellar Blade may just be a stepping stone and a throwaway game, and we'll have a new character like Eve in the next one. It's probably not going to be like Bayonetta, where you introduce Bayonetta and then make a trilogy around it. Anyways, I'm running out of time very rapidly here, so that's going to be it for this live stream, as I guess what it's called. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, and keep on watching. Thanks.